When we have an event, storm event in DFW, it seems like insulation or the attic is sort of the last thing on the punch list. And so if you have water damage and your insulation gets wet, it's not going to just work itself out. Wet insulation is not going to dry out and be what it once was. Kind of the soggy sandwich effect. Your sandwich gets wet at the theme park, let it dry out, and it's just not going to taste the same, right? So wet insulation needs to be removed and replaced. Insulation, by its very science, is installed very fluffy and light and has lots of air pockets. And once it gets wet or stepped on, it can get compressed and condensed, and you're just not going to get it back to that fluffy, light, air pocket nature. And insulation needs to be fluffy and light so that it traps heat from going from one space to another. So wet insulation usually is overlooked by insurance or even contractor. You might remove the little spot that got wet and fell through, or got wet and washed away if there was that much water. But you really need to take a good look at the insulation surrounding a damaged area. And it's kind of hard to tell sometimes if it got wet and has dried out. But both from a function standpoint and just a mold and mildew and contaminant and bacteria standpoint, insulation is going to absorb water. Sheetrock will absorb water. And so now you have a gap there between healthy air and a possibility of growth. Secondly, just insulation a lot of times is removed, but then not replaced or trampled through and not fluffed back up or replaced. And insulation that's been removed or trampled through and not replaced, you're going to feel the difference at some point. So it may be comfortable today, you may have your sheetrock back up and the house is back to normal. But down the road, you're going to be wondering, like, why is this room a little bit hotter or colder than usual? And why is our electric bill a little bit different than it used to be? And that's an insulation problem that just wasn't dealt with or should be dealt with properly after a storm. Wet insulation not only will perform poorly from a thermal standpoint, but can promote the growth of bacteria. So anything that absorbs water and might hold it for a long time, like a cabinet or wood floors or sheetrock, insulation, I think would fall in that same category where you gotta be really careful. Mold and mildew grows really fast. So cold, dark, and wet spaces like your attic will grow things quickly. So if you've had wet insulation or damaged insulation from a water event or a storm or anything AC related, it's a really good idea to have us come out and move that stuff around and see if you've got stuff growing on the back of your sheetrock, and we can remove and replace insulation or bring in a professional that might deal with a worse growth or bacteria situation. Most of the time it's just remove the bad materials, put new materials back in. Well, you don't need to stay up at night worrying about your insulation every night, all night, every day. After an event or contractors have been in and out, it's a really good idea just to have your attic inspected and make sure it hasn't been walked through or old shingles haven't fallen through and trampled or compressed insulation. And that's a very easy inspection. It might just be to top it off. It might be that there was more damage than you thought and some parts need to be removed and replaced. But don't let out of sight, out of mind be a good strategy for you, because you might feel it down the road when it gets hot or cold or your bill gets really high, and it could have been a really easy touch up to prevent those things from happening.